Hello and welcome to Cardboard Hunter. So today we are going to do our top 10 most anticipated games of 2024. These are the games going into the new year that I am most interested in playing or actually straight up purchasing and owning. So the way I did my list from 10 to 1 was the scale from really want to play it in the new year versus really want to own it as quickly as possible. So I think all of these are games that I will likely play in 2024, and the further down on the list, the more likely I'm going to own them. Spoiler, the top 4 I've already pre-ordered, so I will absolutely own the top 4. And we're going to start this off with a couple honorable mentions and even one dishonorable mention. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that we are still doing our giveaway for Bust. This is sealed, factory sealed, 20th anniversary, Deluxe Kickstarter edition from Splotter and Capstone games. It's a very pricey, very rare copy of one of the greatest games ever made. Stick around to the end of the video. I'll give you more details on how to win this. It will be going to one of our subscribers in the first quarter of 2024. So there is still time to enter, and we should have a winner pretty soon. So honorable mention number 1 is Cyclades, or Cyclades, I believe is the proper way, but Cyclades rolls really well off the tongue. But I'll try to say it proper for the video. Cyclades is a reprint of an old, phenomenal game. If you've never had the chance to play this one, and if you haven't backed it, then I highly recommend getting your hands on an older copy, which is going to be a phenomenal experience. I still have my older copy, even though I did back this one. I have not sold my older copy yet because I still want to play it as much as possible because I love the game until I get my hands on this newer one. The newer one's really just a deluxeified version. I would recommend taking advantage of the cheaper copies about to hit the market, as everyone who backed the deluxe version is letting those older copies go. Grab one of those for cheap, see if you enjoy the game. Later on, maybe upgrade to the 2024 reprint. But the reason I have not included Cyclades in the list is because A, I'm not completely confident it's delivering in 2024, though it most likely will, and B, I'm not sure what the retail situation for this is, because it kind of seems like it was kind of a one-time deluxeified version of the game and you either backed it or good luck on the secondhand market. So I did not include that in the top 10 as it's going to be a little harder to get a hold of, if you even can get a hold of it in 2024. But man, the new board looks beautiful. All of the new artwork pieces. I am so excited for this one. I mean, any chance I get to take one of my favorite games of all time and get a more deluxeified version, super pumped for that. Okay, and honorable mention number 2 is a game that was on the top 10, and I had to finally admit to myself it's not coming to us in 2024, which is Horror on the Orient Express, which I believe started as a Call of Cthulhu RPG campaign, which was met with a lot of excitement and praise. And they've now made a board game version, which does appear to take a lot of that beautiful role-playing aspect from Call of Cthulhu and bring it into the board game realm while giving it a little bit more mechanics to play with than you'd probably normally get in a role-playing game. So I don't think either is better than the other, but for us more in the board gaming hobby, I think this is an awesome way to experience Call of Cthulhu if you don't exactly have a lot of role-playing dates on your schedule. Though, asterisk, I highly recommend playing Call of Cthulhu if you get the chance. It is a phenomenal role-playing game, one of my favorites to play. Me and my friends try to get a game in every time we make it out to Dragon Con. And this brings me to my dishonorable mention. So this is a game I'm excited for, but I want to rail about my dissatisfaction and my distaste for the company and the way that they have handled their campaign. This was a Kickstarter by Mythic Games, Six Siege, which is a board game implementation of a Rainbow Six video game that was apparently very much loved by its gaming community, and the board game looks phenomenal. It really won me over when they first dropped it. It almost looks like if a dungeon crawler met an abstract strategy game and you just put rifles and Rainbow Six into the mix. I mean, it genuinely looks like a very fun, exciting game that's going to be very different from a lot of the other board games that have attempted to take from those first-person shooter video games. So I think this one's going to stand very tall in that regard. But Mythic Games, to say they fumbled this one is a negligent understatement. They have absolutely abused and exploited our community, and they should never be forgiven for that. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what they have done with Six Siege, Darkest Dungeon, and other titles is, in my opinion, completely inexcusable, and I can speak for myself when I say I will never, under any circumstance, back a Mythic project moving forward. It's going to be hard for me to even keep this in my collection because every time I see that logo, it kind of makes my stomach turn. Now, all of that being said, we are finally moving into our top 10, so let's just get right into this. Let's not waste any time. So, number 10 is Kelp. Now, this is an interesting one because I feel like over the last 5 or so years, you've had these different genres of board games that have got this makeover with these new cutesy animal themes and illustrations brought into the game to kind of make them more broad appealing, which has clearly worked. And it seems like abstract strategy is up next, which is interesting. And for someone who typically has issue with people just abusing a popular theme and cutesy illustrations just to try to sell a game that needed a little bit more time in the oven, I am excited to see the spotlight shining on a genre of game that I think deserves a lot more love than it gets, which is abstract strategies. Kelp, unlike all the other titles, is actually going to be releasing within a week or two. If you go on Amazon right now, I think it's $30 on sale as of the time of recording this. Kelp is a brilliant little abstract strategy game that is very asymmetrical. So one person is playing the shark, and the shark, their objective is to eat the other player who's playing the octopus. So the shark is playing kind of this tableau meets abstract strategy where you're building your little engine a little stronger and getting better dice that do various things. I think the blue dice are how you move, the yellow dice are how you investigate to search for the octopus, and the red dice are how you actually make your attacks. So throughout the game, the shark is getting more and more aggressive, better and better at hunting the octopus. The more the shark exerts itself, the more hungry it gets, which just seems so thematically correct. Even if the shark does catch the octopus, it kind of bounces over to this mini game where you both play a card face down, and if they match, then the shark has chosen correctly and does go in for the kill. If they don't match, the octopus narrowly escapes, gets a little buff, but then those 2 cards are removed from those 3 cards each that you have. So every time this encounter happens, it gets more and more likely until that last time it gets 100% likely that the shark will overcome and make that kill. So the shark is getting more aggressive and hungry while the octopus is getting more strategic and cunning throughout the game. On the octopus's side, its asymmetrical game is more of a deck builder meets hidden movement. You have these different tiles that are facing you, so you know exactly where you are as the octopus on the board, as well as where your food is that you're trying to capture, as well as other little effects that, you can lead the shark into a trap. Your resource that you're kind of expending is revealing certain tiles to your opponent, the shark. You're adding either a new card or a new ability to your character. However, you're giving very valuable information to your opponent. So it's this push and pull of, I really need this little buff real quick, but then the shark's going to get that little smell of blood and he's a little bit more on your trail. So you have to act very quickly to overcome that advantage you just gave your opponent. It looks like a great game. I'm excited to try this one. This brings us to number 9, which is a very exciting game called Evacuation. This is designed by Vladimir Suchi of Shipyard. Evacuation is currently on pre-order at Miniature Market for $49, if I'm not mistaken. This is a brilliant lighter midweight Euro that turns into the heavier midweight Euro based on how you want to play it. It comes with both modular expansions as well as an advanced mode to play it. And so the whole game, the theme is you're leaving a dying planet. You had built up all kinds of factories and resources. All of the different players are completely rich and overloaded with any resources they could imagine, but their carelessness and neglect to take care of this planet has led to its death. Let's not look too far into that. And now you've found a new planet and you're all going to be competing to get your resources to the new planet as economically sound strategically as possible. So you start the game just overrun with any resources you need. And you're basically, I think the theme would be you're kind of deconstructing a lot of your factories and dipping into your reserves so you can build ships to carry resources over. Those resources will eventually be used to build factories on the new planet, so the new planet can actually pick up the slack and start building more and more of your resources. So you kind of start like this, using your resources on dying planet A, and by the end of the game, you've lost all contact with that planet, and you're having to rely on your resources on the new planet you've built up on. So it's this balancing act of when are you going to really start converting over to relying on the old world to relying on the new world. So as the game progresses and you're taking all your population, you can accidentally leave population, leave resources, factories, you name it, on that old world. And if you relied on the old world too long, by the time those last ships are going, it's kind of that sad moment where you're kind of waving to the people that you know there's not another ship coming. You told them there's another ship coming. You even left some steel there to make them think that another ship was coming, but there's definitely no. The satellites have moved on. You don't even have communication with that planet anymore. You abandoned them, and you have to admit that. And then you get to the new planet, and if you waited too long to build up your infrastructure, well, now the other players have a huge advantage on you with their production. Getting to the new planet too early is hard because the other players are able to build so much more early to mid-game as they have those huge, vast amounts of resources they're digging into on the old world. But if you get to the new world too late, everyone else's production is way above yours. In the late game, you struggle. And it's just absolutely brilliant trying to find not only where's that sweet spot for the game mechanically, but that sweet spot is going to be different every game based on decisions you and your opponents make. So it really brings that side of that competitive playing your opponent and not head down playing yourself that I love. Style of old school German Euros. But again, like I was mentioning, with the more advanced and modular expansions, it does convert more into that head down, complex, heavy, lots of things going on Euro, if that's what you prefer. It's nice to have both flavors in one box that's not even that pricey. I'm very much excited for this one. This brings us to number 8, which is a Reiner Knizia game, which can you have a top 10 without at least one Knizia? Let me know down in the comments. This is Cascadero. So Reiner Knizia really likes his tile kind of area. I don't know if area control is what I would call them, like area scoring type games are more appropriate. He's got the more competitive old school German Euro style, very abstract strategy like Samurai, Tigris and Euphrates, or Yellow and Yangtze, where the game is very competitive and it's very, I take this, you can't get this, or you have to come fight for this, versus I guess like his Through the Desert Babylonia, Blue Lagoon, similar games, which are a little less confrontational head-to-head, a little bit more in slightly point salad, where you're just trying to get points in these areas and not totally cut your opponents off. Though with the right route building, you can make it a little bit more challenging for them. But this seems to follow that style of game, which might be better for your group if you think like Tigris and Euphrates and Samurai is a little too cutthroat for the people you play with. This one looks more like the Reiner Knizias that keep their fangs a little bit more reserved. In Cascadero, you're building these routes, which are effectively kind of cargo routes where you're taking one thing to another. Now, in the game, you're not necessarily moving resources from one area to another, but as you're hitting these different areas along the way, you're scoring points, and how you connect different ones scores you more and more points. So thematically, I suppose what you're doing is building a trade route where you would easily move resources along different cities and encampments. And this game, really, you're just pinging points left and right. He's not stingy with the scoring on this one. And also, one thing that's very fascinating is, you know, with a lot of games like this, usually if you're the first to do something, you're going to score the most points for it. But in this game, coming second actually scores you more points in a lot of situations than being first. So it's a very different puzzle than a lot of his similar games, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I feel very confident I'm going to love this game, but I lean more towards the Reiner Knizias that have more bite to them to keep in my collection. So to me, this is a game that I'm going to love the opportunity to play it with friends at a meetup or game night. While at my house, I'm probably going to table something more like Tigris and Euphrates when I have the opportunity. But I'm not ruling it out. If I love the game, I'll add it to my collection. I believe it's currently available for pre-order on Miniature Market as well. So, number 7, I'm very excited for. This is Arcs from Cole Worley. Some of Cole's notable games are Root, Oath, John Company, and Pax Pamir. So, heavy hitting to say the least. This was a hard game to put in number 7 because of my level of excitement. But I'm approaching this one the same way I approach Root and Oath. Those are 2 games I absolutely love. I have enjoyed every opportunity I've had to play them, but neither of them are in my collection because they are incredibly hard to table and teach games. For example, Root, I find it easier to teach and table Twilight Imperium 4th edition than I do Root. And the reason being is, if I've got 30 minutes to an hour to sit down with my newer players and go through how to play TI4, they're going to have a pretty good idea, and once the game starts, they can then watch everyone else take their turns and kind of learn a lot of the other things as they go. And you know, a lot of it is kind of rinse and repeat. Once you've seen a lot of people do the same thing, you've kind of got your head around it. The problem with Root is it takes a pretty decent teach up front too, but every player is so asymmetrical that watching the others not only makes you forget how to even do your thing that you were learning, and also keep in mind, when you do the teach, you have to teach every other new player separately. It's a whole different game for each player. The idea of owning a copy of Root and tabling it and teaching it sounds like the most painful thing you can possibly do in this hobby. So Arcs is one of these games that I very much need to play this one before I commit to purchasing it, because I don't know if this is going to be another one of their games that I just need to play at conventions and with other people that love this game so I don't have to worry about teaching it, or if this is going to finally be one of their games I can keep in my collection and get excited to bring out. I think it might be. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of what Arcs is and why I'm so excited for it. Arcs is a game that went to crowdfunding in 2022 that I think if it went to crowdfunding in 2024, it probably would have seen 2-3 times the amount of backers, because it takes the 4X genre and mashes it with trick taking, which is crazy to think about putting those two together. And I feel like trick taking in the year 2023 has exploded, and this game was almost a bit before its time. Not that we haven't had trick taking games in 2022 and before, but it was like the hype and the excitement for that genre of board gaming has went crazy throughout the year of 2023. And I'm hoping that this game does finally make a splash when it hits retail. This is a game that, like Twilight Imperium, where you're bidding for that special action you're going to be able to do each round. In Arcs, you're playing a card, and then your opponents are having to play tricks off that card. Your card is going to determine what you can do this turn. And your opponents, based on their hand and their availability and how much they want to use what cards, they're going to have to take certain actions based on what you did. So if I play something that lets me move some troops, they can play a card that lets them move a little bit less troops. I think if you play a card face down, you can do one of anything else, which almost burns a card, but maybe there's something you really need to do even if you can only do it with one unit, and so on. I'm not going to get into all the details, but it is brilliant how you're basically playing this trick-taking game, which is converting into what you're allowed to do on this big sprawling 4X space game. It looks brilliant. This is a game that I will either love and find easily approachable and teachable, and it will add to my collection, or I'll probably still like and be down to play at any time. I really don't see this being a game that I'm not going to like, just because, I mean, they make nothing but hits. And also, they released the files for print and play if you want to just go play it today. I think the files are also on Tabletop Simulator, where you can play it digitally. I expect good things from ARCs. Oh man, moving into number 6. So this is an interesting one. This is Undaunted 2200 Callisto, named after the fourth moon of Jupiter, if I'm not mistaken, which is really funny because I feel like they went through all of these historical battles all the way to Stalingrad and then going to airplanes, and everyone was wondering what they were going to do next. The sky was the limit. Actually, it wasn't. They went to space. They blew right past that sky limit you self-imposed on them and flew straight to Jupiter for the next battle. So I think this one was really amusing because nobody saw this next advancement in the series coming. It is a big box standalone game, much like Stalingrad is. However, it appears they're swapping out the tanks for mechs, and I hope that it's not just a thematic change. I hope there are actual mechanics that go into it. Maybe the mechs are even customizable. I don't have a lot of details on this one. They've genuinely only put out a cover of the box art. Everything else out there is speculation, so I'm not going to speculate too much on this one, besides the fact that the Undaunted system is one of the greatest new systems that's been developed over the last couple years. This game will utilize that system, and I love space and mechs. I think it is currently discounted to $60 for pre-order on Miniature Market. Oh man, this brings us to number 5. So earlier I said that the top 4 I had already pre-ordered myself, but there's an asterisk at number 5 because I have not pre-ordered this one for one simple reason. I already own this one. This is Lords of Vegas. They have a reprint coming out in 2024 that looks like it should be here sometime in the middle of the year. And if you've ever looked at purchasing Lords of Vegas on the secondhand market, it's pretty pricey. I think it's normally anywhere from $80 to $120, and the expansions are just all over the place. And this game is so much fun. It's currently for pre-order on Miniature Market for the new version, which I highly recommend. This is one of those games that I just don't know what board gamer wouldn't have a good time playing this one. It's one of those kind of party games that has an actual bite to it, kind of like Mission Red Planet, while having just enough strategic depth that I actually feel like I played a board game and not just a party game. Lords of Vegas has you basically playing high-ranking mob figures who are obtaining and upgrading and expanding various casinos in old school Vegas, while competing with the other mob leaders for control of these various casinos. And it's just a non-stop roaring laughter as you're gambling in your opponent's casino, knowing that the house always has 56% odds compared to you, which is quite thematic. And you can spend money to kind of renovate the casino, changing it into a whole different kind of casino, or spend money to re-roll control, which I guess thematically is a shootout occurs in the casino, and then we see who comes out on top, which is where if you have a large casino with multiple players in it, you re-roll all of those dice and then you replace them. Now the player with the new highest dice becomes in charge of that casino. So very thematic, very fun. This is a game that I typically don't start my game night with it, because if I do, we might end up doing nothing but replaying this over and over. So I can't recommend that one enough. And with the new reprint, being able to get your hands on it much cheaper than the secondhand market OG version, don't pass up on that one. And moving into number 4, and this is Cthulhu Dark Providence. This is for pre-order on the CMON website, and it is a reskin of a Study in Emerald. So this is an interesting one. So if you've never heard of A Study in Emerald, was an IP based on a short story by author Neil Gaiman, which is funny because Neil Gaiman's name on the box for A Study in Emerald is bigger than Martin Wallace's, so everyone always thought Neil Gaiman was the designer of the game and maybe Martin Wallace was just the artist for the illustrations, until of course Martin Wallace really made a name for himself. Now Martin Wallace has since went on to make some absolutely groundbreaking games, such as the current Board Game Geek #1 of all time, which is Brass Birmingham. Other notable games being Age of Steam, Anno 1800, A Few Acres of Snow, Discworld, Ruinbound, the list goes on and on. Theme for the original Study of Emerald was this Cthulhu meets Sherlock, which had you traversing these various locations in the world and taking different actions or sending agents to take actions for you. So you could be on the Dark One sides, or you could be trying to overcome and restore balance back to the world and push the Dark Ones out. It was a deck builder, honestly ahead of its time, much like A Few Acres of Snow there. And it also had kind of a hidden role and even area control aspect going on in the board as you wanted to put more and more favor into different things. And what made the original first edition of Study in Emerald so special is all of the different things that could happen in those cards were endless. Every game you played, crazy stuff happened, completely different than a game before, and it was a game that you went on and told stories about all the way until you finally got to play it again. It's a game that typically you were going to play more at conventions than anywhere else because it is a beast to teach. It's very niche mechanically and thematically. They did eventually release a second edition, which was at first met with a lot of praise from the content creators as they first got their hands on it, and they said, oh, they streamlined it, they made it way more approachable and easier to teach. And then when it finally really got into the community and the community got to respond, it was more of a, you didn't streamline it, you sterilized it. The board lost a lot of its thematic elements, which had those cities with the different routes that, did that make it a train game? To this very dry, much more limited area. The cards were also much more limited. They took a lot of the big crazy stuff out of it, but ultimately it kind of flopped. So the second edition is usually pretty easy to get your hands on for pretty cheap on the secondhand market if you do like the game and maybe want something a little easier to table. But the first edition is quite pricey on the secondhand market because the people that have it tend to be the people who want it in their collection permanently. So if you do have an opportunity to grab one floating around, you're usually paying a pretty penny for it. I went through all of that because Cthulhu Dark Providence follows more of the original first edition that is so loved among the community. Now, apparently they are trying to approach some mechanics to streamline it and make it a little bit more approachable, even adding alternative roles to either, supporting the Dark Ones or not. There's a little gray area there now, but for the most part, it looks like you're going to get a very similar experience to first edition, probably just with a little bit better written rule book. I actually feel pretty confident they're going to do well with this because at this point, I feel like enough time has passed that we know why first edition was so successful and why second edition wasn't, that with enough grace and forethought, you can approach it and twist a few knobs, push a few buttons without completely destroying what made the game so special. I'm very excited to play that one and have it in my collection because I've never been able to quite get A Study in Emerald in my collection as it's so pricey and it's something that I know I may table once every 3 years if I'm being honest. And this brings us to our number 3, which is very special to me because this is a game that's been on my wish list. I have been actively trying to add to my collection for several years. This is the reprint of Your 1830 BC from Splotter and All Aboard Games. So All Aboard Games has licensed the reprint of Your 1830 BC, which is Splotter's 18XX game. Now, if you're unfamiliar with All Aboard Games, their most famous contribution is 18 Chesapeake. So they have several incredible games that really add something that was missing to the 18XX genre, which is not scaring the living out of anyone who's unfamiliar with the 18xx genre. So the name, as you may assume, is a bit of a play on words of the most popular and first 18xx game, which was 1830, which is the game that most people know the genre by. This is 1830 BC, so as you probably assume, there's no trains in this game, though I do think ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia could have benefited from some rails. Instead of your train system, this relies on an irrigation system. Much like Santiago, one of my personal favorite games of all time, you're going to be bidding and competing for the most fertile land and even having some control of the irrigation routes. Now, this steps a little further than Santiago, in which those irrigation routes aren't necessarily permanent because there are different ways to chokehold the river downstream to prevent water from making its way to where your opponent might really prefer it made it. And unlike other 18xx games where you're typically trying to buy up different stocks and hold the most stock control of a corporation, this game is based on kingdoms, and whoever owns the most pieces of land in the various kingdoms will be the king of those specific kingdoms. And you'll see that change a lot because as the values start to get higher and higher on certain pieces of land, it's going to get a little enticing to trade that crown for some dinero. What's beautiful about the irrigation system is as these lands get fertilized, they cause that kingdom to take in money. And then the current king of that kingdom will decide whether or not that income is going to stay in the coffers of the kingdom, or if he's going to be a benevolent king and allow for a couple dollars to make their way into the landowners, the various players that have stake in that kingdom. And there's pros and cons to both of those. I also don't think that this is a game I would necessarily say don't check out if you're not a fan of 18xx, because although it shares quite a bit of DNA with 18xx, truth be told, if it wasn't in the name, I don't know if I ever would have necessarily compared it to an 18xx if someone said, hey, describe that game. I certainly get the connections because I'm aware they exist, but otherwise I'm not sure. If you do like 18xx games, I think it's a fantastic one to have in your collection because it does offer something so different than the other games you've been playing the most. The only warning I'll give you is that in true Splotter fashion, they twist some things you don't expect to have twisted. I should cut that or YouTube is never going to let me monetize my videos. It can be pre-ordered right now at the All Aboard website for a lot cheaper than you're ever going to find a copy on the secondhand market. So I'll leave that one with you, what you want to do on number 3. But let's move on to number 2, which is another Splotter game. I know, calm down, I'm excited too. We can contain our excitement together. And this is Indonesia. This one is available for pre-order on Game Nerds for $77, which is about a third of what this game costs on the secondhand market. So Indonesia has you basically building routes, much like Bus, where you're building routes to try to deliver something to somewhere else. In Bus, you're building your own routes, which are exclusive to you, which you're either building to have a good way to deliver people from one area to locations in different areas, or perhaps to use it to blockade your opponent so they can't build through that way. But regardless, only you are going to be able to use that route. Indonesia is different. You can build a route that you don't even care about using. You may just be building it so your opponents will use it and you can get paid. In Indonesia, there's a few different paths to victory, but Indonesia is a true economic game in the sense that there's no victory points here. This is won by whoever has the most money at the end of the game. So you are doing everything you can to stack that coin up and try to make profit at every corner you can. Now, there's various ways to do that. The two main ways are building shipping companies and building farming companies. So with your shipment, your cargo area, you're kind of building these different routes that other players will have to pay to use if they want to take goods from one area to cities that want those goods in another area. And once you've built those routes, you're just raking in the dough. And then you have the path of agriculture, which is you're building bigger and bigger farms, trying to produce the most valuable and sought after resources. And one thing that's funny about this one, this game very much could have just been named Monopoly, unlike that really terrible game. And in this game, you truly are trying to build up these giant mega corporations, whether they be shipping or whether they be in agriculture of the various different resource types. You're trying to monopolize your corner of the market. And much like Acquire, you may not be doing these mergers really for your own benefit in the company. Sometimes you do these mergers not caring of the actual outcome of what company survives, but just because you know one of these companies dissolving is going to turn into some juicy profit for you. So that's another path to your insatiable capitalist appetite. You thirst for coin, and you will do anything to get that coin. It gets into a little bit of an area control economic struggle there, as well as, of course, the resource struggle that you have in the game, and of course, the route building struggle. It's just, there's so many different levels to this game, and once you get it down, it's not nearly as complex as it looks on the surface, which that's Splotter games in a nutshell. You know, this one is kind of like, if you like Acquire for its mergers and stock trading attributes, and you like Imperial 2030 for its building up of the countries and then ransacking all their money and pawning it off on another player, and you like Bus for the pickup and delivery. This really has all of those, but it also has the weight of all of those combined, and then some. Indonesia is arguably Splotter's magnum opus in terms of their economic games. I'm not calling Indonesia Splotter's best game by any means, but as far as an economic strategic puzzle is concerned, this game is practically flawless. And this brings us to our number one most anticipated game of 2024, which of course has to be the masterpiece from Wolfgang Kramer and Richard Ulrich, which is El Grande. The 2024 reprint of El Grande looks beautiful. I think the UK has somehow got copies early, but here in the US, if you pre-order it through Miniature Market for a discounted price of $36, which is a steal, then you will be getting it likely in the first quarter of 2024, but otherwise I'm sure in the second quarter. But don't hold me to that. The original El Grande and El Grande, the big box version, I think normally goes for about 100, 150 on the secondhand market. I'm sure that's dropping a little bit with this reprint coming to market. And though I think this will become the new definitive edition of El Grande, I don't think it means throw away the old version of it. You know, if you have an opportunity to get your hands on the big box El Grande for a very reasonable price, then probably don't pass it up. But then again, who's ever going to sell that big box for $36? It's like, you're just better off to go pre-order this one now. El Grande, over any other game on this list, is one I would recommend for just about anyone, especially at $36. I mean, this game is so solid. I would put it head to head with every game on the Board Game Geek Top 100, with a few exceptions, and choose El Grande any day. So this new version makes the game way more approachable, way more aesthetically pleasing. To give this one a bit of a facelift, to try to reintroduce it to the community, is super exciting. I hope everyone gets their hands on this one and gets to try this game. You know, if you don't buy it in 2024, I certainly hope you get a chance to play it in 2024. El Grande is known as the king of the area control genre, you know, or area majority, dudes on a map game. I get why it gets that title, but at the same time, I think this is a Euro game in disguise as an area control game. When you think area control, you think war game, battling, you lose dudes, I lose dudes, winning the game by just completely overcoming your opponent through sheer force. But this is a victory point scoring type of game. And though you're scoring based on the territories, it's not even whoever has the most meeple in an area scores the points and everyone else is out. It's depending on player count, there's usually a first, second, and third place when each area scores. But where the Euro side of this one really shows is in the hand management, is in the little bit of engine building. I wouldn't say deck building, but you are playing certain cards so that you can gain other cards as quickly as possible, because you want those actions, you want those different scoring conditions, and there's even some kind of hidden strategy to the game. So one of the mechanics that is so brilliant in this game is the tower, or I think it's called a Castillo in the game. Every player is going to have an opportunity throughout a round to drop a few meeple into. And though it's public information every time you drop a meeple into it, as everyone does it several times throughout a round, you never know exactly who has the lead or who doesn't. And if you really try to count and keep track of that, well, we all have so much bandwidth that trying to allocate too much to memorizing who has what in that tower means you're probably missing other valuable information on the board. So it balances itself. I never really get too worried about if anyone's trying to count exactly. Now, you want to waste all those brain cells doing that, have at it. And then at the end of the round, when you reveal it and you see who has the most, they're going to score so many points, second scores, third scores. But even more impressive is before the round was over, everyone secretly chose one location on the board and played it face down. All of the meeples of theirs that come out of that tower now go to that area of the board. So maybe you weren't even really trying to score with the tower. You just wanted to secretly go for a certain area. It's absolutely brilliant. And what I love about it is you never really truly know if you have control of an area. You're always sweating a little bit like, I think I got it, but anything can happen when this round ends. But yeah, at the $36 for the pre-order of this one, I would recommend anyone do that and playing it. And if you don't like it, I assure you, you have a friend or a family member who would love to receive this as a gift. And when it finally arrives at my doorstep, I'm sorry for everyone who comes over and plays games with me. This one's going to be in heavy rotation for a while. Now, that's our top 10. I appreciate you guys tuning in for this one. And as I said before, let's talk about our free giveaway. We have the Splotter and Capstone Deluxe Kickstarter version, still in shrink, factory sealed bus, 20th anniversary. And I have another video on the channel where I pull my personal copy down and actually open it and show you all the components, the upgraded wooden components, the original 1999 board that's included inside of it, which is a fever dream. And the rules are simple for this one. You just comment on this video or any other video on the channel. Every video you comment on gets you one entry into the contest. And at some point in the first quarter of 2024, we will pull a winner. So any day now, definitely before the first quarter is up of the new year, someone will have this heading their way. And I hope they love it as much as I love it. But if not, this is a very rare, very pricey game. So you can always sell that motherfucker. And with that being said, thanks for joining, and I'll see you in 2024 still hunting some cardboard.